Hi everybody, welcome to the latest episode, and for me and Stephen, even though one has already gone out this year, this is actually our first get together of 2024, so belated Happy New Year. I bet you're all sick of hearing that by now. Anyway, that is a really slick segue into the title of today's podcast. So we've decided not to call it anything about New Year's resolutions, but we've kind of done it through the back door by calling this episode Setting Realistic Goals. Now, as per usual, the new year has started in the same way. This is Stephen's idea. So, what are you trying to sneak in here?
Oliver. Hello, everyone. Oliver, it's that time of the year where everyone sort of sits back and thinks, right, what am I going to do for 2024? A lot of people have always started, the list that they put together. And I suppose this podcast for me is all about sort of talking about, are those goals that you've set yourself realistic? I've seen some people already, we're not even 10 days in, and I've already seen some people with real anxiety because they've gone with some things that now they're thinking, not too sure about it, one. Secondly, some unforeseen circumstances have now happened. So it's almost like, no, remember, you can change them. You're in charge of your own goals that you've set. You can change them. You can be flexible. And it's just really getting people to just check that your list is achievable. I'm not saying don't make your list magical. Don't make your list have challenge in them. Don't dream big. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is, don't allow your list to put you under so much pressure before the year's even started that you go into February feeling really, really low because, you've set yourself such high expectations which are not going to be met.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, I go a little bit further. This is always a little bit mean, but when I talk to clients about this, because I got no issue with setting things in the start of the year, it is a great time to reset. There's the book Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about how our minds are programmed to do this sort of thing, and it's a big but. And the thing I always say to my clients, and I say it's the same people listening now, you didn't effing do it before Christmas and the months leading to it. Why do you suddenly think in January, arguably the worst month of the year, that it's going to suddenly work? There are a whole load of other factors that we need to look at first before we can set these goals, whatever they may be. I mean, I dread to think that even though we're recording this sort of just after the first week in January, it's going out in about the third week of January, how many people have signed up to gyms? Yeah. I was mentioning a particularly expensive one, which I won't mention on air, and I've fallen for that trap. I've fallen in there, and I've been, not just a 3-month one, I've done the 12 months. At the start of the year, and that hurts when you don't then continue going to it. So it's about how you set them, isn't it? Absolutely. Yes. I mean, this is one of the things I'll sort of come back to you before going explaining, and then I'll come on and explain. I love something called the GROW model, and I'll explain it in a minute. But for me, that's one of the things that I really question. I don't know if you find that if you've not done it the year before, what suddenly magically changed in January? Yeah. Like I say, one of the toughest months of the year for many people. Yeah. That's going to make it successful. So don't be hard on yourself, but also be realistic with yourself.
Absolutely. And also, I do think when you're thinking about setting things up that you would like to achieve, you do need to think about, well, what do I need to achieve that? Because sometimes, it might not be just down to you. You might need some help and support. You might need some equipment to do that specific thing. You might even need to educate yourself. You might need to have some learning. There might be some books that you need to read. And I guess it's understanding when you put that list together, what does it actually mean? And also, how invested are you in it to achieve it? Because, it's fine sitting there writing a list out, but, how invested are you in actually achieving that so-called list? Because I know one thing's for sure, if that list is unrealistic, if that list is not achievable, and then you start, the emotional effect it has on you and the negative effect that it can have on you, and not just you, but those around you as well, can be quite, really destructive, can really hurt. Yep. And I'll just give you an example, those of you that know me now, I've really done my MCL in before Christmas, and it's in a pretty bad way. So when I was setting my objectives for this year, I had to sort of take a bit out, thinking actually you're not going to be in the physical condition that you've always been, so you might need to change that slightly. So yes, you won't be surprised to know that on my list is some things to do with increasing the heart rate and activity. But if you can't run, can you walk? Rather than setting yourself X number of miles running, could you do X number of miles walking, X number of miles running? In the working environment, rather than saying to yourself, I'm going to do that over the next 6 months, maybe you might go, well, I'm going to do that over the next 12 months to make it slightly easier. What milestones you're going to put in order to say, well, yeah, am I going in the right direction? And if I'm not going in the right direction, tweak it, change it. It's your list. But for me, it's really around the psychological effect it can have on us as well, where we set these goals, real rigid goals that we set out to achieve. And listen, I don't think anyone goes into this with the wrong intentions. I think that is the point. We go in with the right intentions, but maybe for not thought it through enough and not given it enough kind of understanding, well, what does this actually mean for me and also those around me. I can remember one year setting a target of doing X number of gym sessions in a week, which when I worked it back, it meant I had to get up at 5 a.m. and leave at 5:30. And at the time, I didn't think about, well, how was that going to affect my partner at the time? If I'm getting up at that time, what does that mean for her sleep and things like this? So it really is. It's sort of opening it up a bit more, looking at it in the broader sense, and being realistic.
Yeah. Well, this is why I love the Grow model. For anybody listening, and if you've not heard of it before, I'll explain it shortly. But there's also a book called Coaching for Performance. It's not a coaching book alone, but in it, it has a good few pages on the Grow model. So if you want to research it, it's by Sir John Whitmore. I think there's now a 10th edition, so you can get any of them because even the first and second editions are good. But anyway, the Grow model, it's an acronym, and it's explained as follows. So the G stands for goal. So what's the goal? The R stands for reality. So what's the reality of the situation? You've set this goal, but what's the reality of you being able to do it? Then O can stand for a couple of things really: opportunities or obstacles. So what opportunities are there in front of you? What obstacles are in your way? And then finally, the big piece, the bit that most people fall off on, the W stands for will. What will you do? Okay, so a lot of people set a goal, and they don't first of all realise that what they've set isn't a goal. There's that challenge. So lots of people will say that, I don't know, the stereotypical ones that I want a big house, I want a nice car. That's not a goal. That's an outcome of a series of events, and it won't change anything because it's got nothing to do with purpose. And how many times do we hear people who suddenly are successful? They get the nice house, they get the nice car, and whatever other bits that go with it, and they're still not happy and they haven't succeeded in anything because they haven't found purpose, they haven't got happiness, they may be single or whatever it is. Yeah. And the idea of the house is actually about having an amazing home to build a family in, or have your friends round, or build lasting memories, feel safe, feel comfortable. It's a hell of a lot more than just a price tag and a size of home. So the first thing is understanding what the goal is, and then when you've got a clear idea on what the goal is, realizing the reality of that situation. So if you want the nice house, for example, and then to have the nice home, your earnings are a really important part of that. So what's the reality of the situation? So what are the obstacles? What are the opportunities? Is there an opportunity for career progression, or are there multiple people in your way? And then finally, what are you going to do about it? And one of the things you might look at that scenario is think, well, I need to leave, or I need to do something else, or I need to, I don't know, set up a new business or range of different products or something along those lines. But when you actually sit down and go through the process of thinking about it, rather than just writing the headline on a list, as you said, then you can start planning for it. So what I feel is many people will go over this and over this and over this and over this year on year. They've never really sat down and looked at it properly. And then, exactly as you say, within a matter of weeks or months, they get really down on themselves, or perhaps the people around them, because they feel they're not achieving whatever it is they need to do. Imagine if you own a business and you need more money to achieve the house, and then your employees or your partners in the business, it feels like they're not performing for whatever reasons. Well, have we looked at the reality of the situation? Is the market, take a good old one would be a estate agency, maybe year on year you've had growth, and last year was the first year you saw it retract. well, that's not changed early doors in 2024. It may change, but what plans have you made around that? And I don't mean to pick a state agency out, but I think we can all recognise the housing market's been a challenge. So it's about looking at it properly, being fair on yourself, being fair on the other people around you. And I just think the Grow model and the way it's referenced in that particular book, or I think it's probably on Audible as well, is just a really good way of looking at it, because we're not going to be there with you most of the time. Luckily, occasionally we are. But if we're not, you want to be putting tools in front of people that will help them. And for me, that's a really good one. So I don't know what things you potentially encourage people to look at.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's the old tried and tested SMART, you know, which I know a lot of people use, which is, you know, making sure that your goals are specific, that they're measurable, that they're achievable, that they're realistic, and that they're time bound, you know, so that you know, I think one of the hardest things with any goal setting, whenever you're setting them, is to hold yourself accountable. And I think that's one of the challenges that people sometimes find difficult, is, you know, making myself accountable for the goals that I've set. And I think that's the most important thing, is set those goals and take responsibility for them first and foremost. And as I said, you know, I do feel that goals have to be revisited as you go, especially goals that you set for a year. You know, have to be revisited to make sure that you're on the right track, but also that they're still, you know, feasible, based on whether that's economic circumstances, or whether that's circumstances within your life, and whether that's you know the shapes now changed in terms of, you know, the shape of things coming out of a year and going into a new year to what it is now. But SMART's always been one that I've always used, which I think a lot of people would have used at some point in their career, or if you haven't used it, you know, write it down. It really is a good one, and it makes you think. Similar to the Grow, it just makes you think about, you know, what it is that you want to do and how you're going to go about it, and how much time you're going to give yourself on that. And the other thing I would say as well, have a mixture of goals that are not just all work related. You know, some which might be fun, some that you might want to do with your partner, some that you want to do as a family. I think those goals as well can be just as important as ones that we set ourselves for work. And what that actually does as well, it keeps it light, and again, it doesn't put too much pressure on yourself. And so I always think, you know, really think quite broad with goals, so that they're not just all around work related, that there's some there around fun, and even things like, you know, I know you're a keen golfer. You know, I like getting out and about and doing things, and it's like even those sort of targets are great. I actually know someone, a lady by the name of Jane, she sets herself goals every year, but her goals are really clever because they're set over a long period of time, and it might be like, I want to cycle this many miles, but it's over a longer period, or I want to, you know, walk for this many minutes a week, which over a month is X. So if I miss one day, it's not going to hurt. I can miss a few days a month and still catch up. So it's those kind of goals, I think, as well, that are quite good because they're realistic.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel up to it one day, you can miss a day and you can still hit your goal. So those sort of things.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good point, and thank you very much for being able to bring up golf, because now as you've mentioned it, it would be rude for me not to explain. So I'm quite fortunate that I'm quite proud to be a 6 handicap. And at the start of last year, I was an 8 handicap, and the aim was to get as lower if I could, and I wanted to get to 6 because that's where my granddad got to, and of course I wanted to outdo my granddad. So now I've got to, yeah, which I did, and you know, then I've looked at it now, and I want to get down again. However, I know a lot of people who play golf who will set this arbitrary figure of I want to be such and such a handicap in each year, and I look at it and I think, I have to admit smugly, you ain't got a chance, because I know they're not going to do all the things that I've done. Now, I'm lucky I have the time to do it, but I also manage my time well enough to. But it involves playing a reasonable amount and practicing a reasonable amount and actually thinking about what it is I want to do. There's a whole series of actions that lead me there to get to it. And in previous years, when I've had aims and ambitions, I had a bad back injury a few years ago. Well, I wasn't going to then suddenly beat myself up for not hitting the goals that I had at that particular time. But I look at so many people who will say this, I want to be, you know, single figures handicap or something like that. And you're like, it's just not going to happen. It's not even like it's a possibility. You just know ain't going to happen. And then what happens, they start to really resent a game that should just be something they enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, it's 3 or 4 hours out there sometimes, and for some people, it's 3 or 4 hours of misery because they've not put in the plans in place. So I know it sounds trite and an excuse for me to just, you know, arguably brag, but there is a serious point at the end of it, you know, that you have to put in, or you get out what you put in, you know. It's an old adage.
Absolutely.
And you know, I put a lot into that because I'm A, obsessed with it, and B, I thoroughly enjoy it, and I kind of reap the rewards for it. And it's the same with everything, but unfortunately it does take a lot of time and it takes a lot of planning. It doesn't have to be rigid though, and like you said, it needs to be flexible. And even if you aren't achieving the goal, if you're heading towards it, just move the goalpost a little bit. And suddenly, I've done this to myself a few times where I've got myself stuck, not on golf necessarily, but on other things where I've set this goal, and I'm heading towards it, but I haven't reached it by the time I said I would. But the thing is, has anybody died at that particular point? No. Am I making the right trajectory? Am I getting there? Yes. Well, then push it back. It's not, you know, unless it is life and death, it's really not worth stressing yourself out if what you can do is shift it, if you're doing the things you need to do, if you're taking the action. You know, if you're not doing it, then just putting it off is not what we're recommending here. But yeah, if you're getting close, we'll just extend the deadline, That's fair, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, you know, the other thing I'd add to that is your goals are your goals. Don't look over someone else's shoulder and think you need to change your goals because their goals are different to yours, or you're inadequate because you're not doing X, Y, and Z, and comparing yourself with someone else. Those goals are personal to you. And as I always said, it's you versus you in life. And I know with social media, we've talked about it before, that we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people. But it really is about, it's your goals. You've set them for yourself. And you shouldn't put yourself under unnecessary pressure because you're looking over your shoulder at someone else's goal and thinking, well, I should be doing that. You know, if there's one thing that we all learn, you know, we all have a bit different body types, our minds all work differently, we're all good at different things, we all learn at different rates. You know, so to compare yourself and do something because someone else is doing it isn't always the best way either.
No, especially if you're comparing yourself because they've achieved it. Well, you don't know how long they've been doing it. You don't understand what mental or physical attributes they have to, you know. It's just like the primal one would be, and you would know this better than myself because I don't spend a lot of time in gyms, but the few times I have been in there, even I've clocked myself thinking, oh, that guy's doing that really well, or lifting that much, or he seems a similar size to me. And he's like, no. That noise you can hear if you're not watching videos of me slapping my head, because I was like, no, you're falling into the trap. You, of all people, should know better, Oliver. Yeah, I don't. But I am able to catch myself because so many people will give up because they don't feel that they're achieving what they need to do. But it's hard to get fit, you know. It doesn't, you get some quick gains fairly early doors, but then maintaining it, and it's not always enjoyable for some people. And like I say, if you're intimidated by what other people are doing, that's obviously not going to help you at all. But in most cases, people in the gym were where you're at now.
Absolutely.
Not always, but most of the time they have been.
Everyone starts somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, everyone has to start somewhere.
So no, I think it's a really useful episode. I mean, for me, I've got what I needed off my chest. I think you've got what you've needed off your chest. Is there any sort of final points you'd like to make to everybody?
Yeah, I would just like to say, you know, the list is obviously been made by now. When this goes out, reevaluate that list. Just make sure you're comfortable with it, and don't beat yourself up if you're struggling, you know, a few weeks in. Don't be afraid to change the list.
Nice. Excellent way to finish. Right. Thanks for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. There'll be plenty more of these throughout the year 2024. We plan to do it all the way through. So you're not getting rid of us that easily. Anyway, we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Bye for now.